And we'll start off chatting about that. You're the host of Cairns Conversations.
I'm glad you like it, Matty. I now this is a bit of self-promotion, Matt, but today's show, a lot of people have contacted me, and because the station hasn't got enough capacity in the streaming funnel or whatever you call it, a lot of people are getting dropped off the connection. So that's a good sign. It's a bad sign for the station because they need to upgrade their capacity to stream out. But it's a good sign for the popularity of the show, I suppose, man.
And my favourite one of the thing I like about you is you're kind of really not afraid to tackle any subject. So, you've had chats about, as your website says, koalas, space rockets, wind farms, and look, even hot button topics like abortion, which is, that's, I've got to be honest, that's brave.
Yeah.
My favourite two conversations were the ones that you had with Wayne Butcher right after the No campaign, because I know you're on opposite sides of the fence on that one. And mate, it was still a fantastic, courteous conversation where you both made your points well, I thought. And the other one was the population bomb. So look, what I'll get you to do is discuss. And I know this is hard for anything to not your favourite, because no interviewer has favourite.
Yeah.
You can't say that on air. But can you discuss the conversations that have resonated with you the most and that you've enjoyed the most?
Well, it's funny. There's a conversation I had with a bloke called Tony Seabrook. Now, he's the president of the Western Australian Farmers and Graziers Association. I just had him on just recently, but probably about it was before the referendum, and I don't know, he seems like a real character, man of the land type of thing. Obviously, that's what he does. He's a farmer, but he had such a wide perspective on the Aboriginal history over in Western Australia and how it's been cultivated and it's really been exploited by the Western Australian Labor Party government at the moment. I thought that was very engaging. The one I'd done with Rowan Dean was also an interesting one because, man, I didn't realise where he came from. He's been around, that lad. So those ones sort of stand out. Oh, and the other one was Ian Plimer. He's a great bloke, and just talk so much sense. I'm yet to get any of the lefty lovies on, but Matt, for some reason they don't seem appealing to come on the show.
See, that's one thing that I try and do. Like, look, it's no state secret that I lean towards what I would describe as libertarian, moderate conservatism,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I specifically try, and with obvious exception of you, but like I do try and speak to people who not so much I disagree with, although I try and do that as well, but like people whose perceptions I really want to understand. So for me, the great thing about the sort of thing that we do, and it's kind of comparable what we do. Well, I got to say, I think you kick more butt than me, but like, is that we get to understand other people's perspectives. So look, I am sorry to be a little bit self-indulgent on this one, but I really did enjoy that population bomb conversation. Could you just tell me about that?
Well, see,
the listeners, I suppose, more accurately.
Yeah, this is the problem because the mainstream media, they don't like going out of their lanes, and they're very tiny, narrow tracks. Those lanes are, but that particular professor I had, now he was obviously from Sri Lanka, I think he was, and he had a very thick accent, but what he was saying was so on the money that this is a problem that everyone keeps talking about. Oh, the overpopulation of the world. We're plateauing now, and there's only one way it's heading. So to have a realization that there's actual people with letters after their name that can see this happening. But the question is, Matt, why isn't this like more of a public information? And that's part of what I do. I'd like to get the other side of the mainstream media's favorite toys at the moment. Well, let's have a look at what's been left on the shelf, and that's how I sort of I trial the internet, see what may be appealing to the listeners, and give it a crack because he was great. He's really, I just can't think of his name at the moment. You got me on the spot there, man. You set me up with that one.
No, look, but I thought it was fantastic. And the thing that I liked, the way that you handled that interview, was that not only did you go into the scientific facts about it, but the conceptual framework around the idea that, look, the whole way that it's framed by
The narrative.
the narrative. The narrative is that, like, it's a problem. Fundamentally, you think about what's behind that, Alan, right? People are a problem. Well, there's only one way to solve a problem when the problem is people, and that's genocide.
That's right. You hit it on the head, mate. And this is what the WF, all those. See, I've only been sort of awakened, I suppose, is a term in the last, I don't know, 10 years, I guess, man. Because like most of the people around the place, you just sort of trust what you believe on the mainstream media. But when you scratch the surface, you think, hang on, that's not what I've been told. And you've just got to make sure you verify the credibility of the people that you're following, because let's face it, there are a lot of bloody nutters out there. But if you say to a lot of people these days about the WF and their sinister reasoning, more than likely people are going to say, yeah, I've heard about that too. There's one thing about the WF that I admire, and that's their honesty, because they tell you they want to kill you. They tell everyone exactly what they're doing, and then people shouldn't be surprised because they're doing what they told us to.
Yeah. Well, and see, that's the thing. Like, you know, it's really strange that this real big change in the media in our lifetimes, because we're about the same age.
Yeah.
It really used to be the case that I seriously used to trust the ABC. And, going back to.
Yeah, please, man. Yeah, like that's what I was brought up on, as you were. And my kids used to hate it when they were little, like when they grown up, primary school, because every time the TV is on, I had to watch the ABC News. You won't see me anywhere near the ABC News now. It is so biased and unbalanced that the whole charter should be thrown out the window. It should be defenestrated. I think that's the term for it, because they don't follow it. And no one, including the Liberals who were in charge for 10 out of the last 12 years, done one thing about it. They complained, but did not do one thing.
They're scared of them. It's that simple. But I mean, you're right. There would be a lot of squawking, but I don't think it'd be as powerful as people think. And why do you even need a public broadcaster now? Like, it made sense in the 1930s, and with a country that was this big, it's like, okay, well, we've got to set up radio infrastructure. And it made sense to a certain degree, even, after TV was introduced, same sort of thing. It's like, oh, well, you got to set up infrastructure. Mind you, America did it just as well and just as quickly. And in a country, excluding Alaska, which admittedly is a pretty big exclusion, but excluding Alaska, they did it quickly, more efficiently over a country that's just as big, with a broader population. Because, as you know, in America, it's like there's population all over the place, whereas our population, really, when it comes right down to it, it's all down the East Coast, a little bit in the southwestern corner, and pretty much that's it, and you just don't need a publicly funded broadcaster now. You don't need it.
No, and TV's, it's a dying breed. TVs are gone. Newspaper is just about gone. But TV's the next big, how would you say, medium that's going to be gone with, I would say, 10, 15 years max. Unless you do a subscription, there won't be any free TV, because the costs aren't, people aren't keeping up with mainstream media because they know it's bullshit.
It's true. And the unfortunate reality is, like, when you look at it, and I know a couple of ABC journalists, and there are some good ones. Charlie McKillop, I'm talking to you. And even the ones that I don't see as good journalists, in so much as that all they do is, like, they stick to the narrative. Look, then they're not bad people. And when you discuss stuff this, with journalists, this funny thing is, because, like, you would think that the prerequisite to being a good journalist would be having a curious mind. Like that would be the prerequisite, the character trait, because everything
Yep.
else can be trained, right? Like, you
Yes.
can be trained. Well, this is how this is how you interview someone. This is how you get both sides of the story. This is the, conceptual framework. They lack curiosity. They just don't care what other people think.
Exactly, and this is why the citizens journalism, it's a term. I think that's why it's so popular. You got that, people are just, they've got a laptop or a camera. They just go out to wherever they want to go. There's no one telling them not to do this, not to do that. Don't talk about this. They just deliver it, and people, it just opens up the world. It's just fantastic. And the more of it, the better, Matt. The more people can see the truth, it just is better for the whole world.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, how do you think? And this is something that I've got to be honest, I've never really understood, and I've spoken to a lot of journos about this. How did this come about? Like, because most of the, I mean, by way of explanation, to give some contextual understanding to that question, like when I was brought up, I would say, so in the 70s, well, I really wasn't listening to news in the 70s because I was born in 71. But in the 80s, when I was just starting to, watch the news, like as a teenager, I would say there was a pretty good balance. Like most of the establishment old ABC guys were, I would say, moderate conservative.
Yep.
All the young ones coming in were quite left leaning, and I could see that back then. But it didn't bother me because at least there was a balance. And coming
Yeah.
from an Irish Catholic, well, we're actually mixed race, but like
Yep.
culturally speaking, we're Irish Catholic, like we were Labor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Labor to our bootstraps.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like aware of that, but how did this massive change happen so quickly?
It's an easy question to answer there, Manny. Not being a smartass, just look back on the last 20 years or so. Now, those journalists that are dominating it at the moment, where did they get their education? They all went to a place called a university. The universities have been the cesspit of left-wing garbage for the preceding, I would say, from the 80s onwards.
Yeah.
And this is just coming out in society now that these people, they have got no idea of reality. They are just taught this diatribe of leftist leaning, everything's in color. Yeah, you got to look at everything in color or everything in a minority thing. Like, it's just that real people don't see color. Normal people don't see color unless you exploit that obvious disparity between people. Me, we all grew up in Queensland, where there's a large percentage of all races, but no one ever. I didn't certainly see colour in anything, but these days, if you send your kids to university these days, you're doing your kids a disservice because they will get culturally indoctrinated to the latest Marxist socialist crap.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was too dumb to go to university, Matt, and I saved the trade.
Yeah, I mean, see, that's it too. I try and give the devil his due on this one. I do think about it a lot, and it's not as if there aren't racial. I mean, as you know, I'm an ex police officer, and it's true that Indigenous people are arrested disproportionately and are also incidentally disproportionately victims of crime. So I mean, so yeah, I mean, are there these things that sometimes are noticeable through race? It's like, yeah, true. But is race the cause? Like, I mean, I wouldn't have joined, and this is what I say to people, because like, most of my friends, well, a good proportion of my friends are quite left-leaning, and especially like the new people like me, they kind of like, they just assume, there's just this assumption nowadays when you meet someone new, especially in middle class kind of circumstances. Like, I got to say, it's different in working class. So, if I'm hanging out with tradies, or something like that. But if you're in some sort of middle class place, there's just this assumption that you're going to be left leaning, atheist, you're going to have a certain worldview, and people kind of like talk to me, and they kind of get a bit shocked. It's like sometimes I genuinely feel, and I've been not treated badly, but treated like, oh my God, I've met a deplorable kind of. I think I know how one of the chimps that Diane, some of the chimps in the jungle feel like,
Yeah,
when Diane
yeah,
Fossey or whoever it was has come up and look at them. Oh, look at the monkeys! Like, kind of that's.
yeah.
But
It amazes me how they can go through life like with that outlook on life, Matt. I like having debates. I know me and you have got different things about the police force.
yeah,
But you can still carry a conversation and discuss it in a civilized manner but they're just they just blinkers on. Nah, we're smarter than you. We've got letters after our names, and really, I don't know why I'm wasting my time talking to you, ratbag people from the right side of politics.
you're right. There is a deep, deep condescension there. Actually, let's dive into something that we kind
That's the
of
word,
like,
conversation.
that there is some distinctions on, and I actually now, because it's not specific government policy, as you know, what I can't do on air is criticize government policy, and I got
Yeah,
to make the caveat. So when this goes out, all opinions on here are mine. They are nothing to do with anyone else, any employer or anyone else I'm associated with. And I'm just, I'm just thinking out loud too. Like, my
yeah.
opinions may change. But so, you and I had a bit of a disagreement on the leadership of Katarina Carroll and where the police are going now. So outline your position so we can kind of like have a chat about that.
About Katarina Karen?
Yeah, and where police actually frame it from where policing is going generally.
Right.
And then because obviously that is linked in with the leadership because you
Yeah.
cannot, you can't make the distinction between where an organization is going and the leadership,
Yeah. No, that's fine. And this is just from, I would class myself as the average Joe off the street. Over the last 5 years, or a little bit longer, I feel that we've seen a deliberate shift in policy from the police, at probably when they started calling the police service rather than police force. That sort of gave the game away there, Matt, right? Because you can't do any enforcement these days. You've almost got to beg them, please, do you mind if we arrest you? If it's not going to be any inconvenience to you, can we actually arrest you from breaking in and creating chaos? Now, I think that I hate using this term, but the wokenisation of the Queensland Police Service is obviously a political thing. They've sung the tune of whatever government's in charge. I mean, the first massive sign I saw of it is when the Palaszczuk government first came in and they scrapped those Vlad laws straight away. The first thing they did, they scrapped those Vlad laws. And I thought, hang on, if they work so good, why would you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater? And I thought, hang on, I'm going to have to watch this. And then it's gradually, they've. This is why I can't understand why they can't understand that people don't want to join the police force, because the police officers are lacking the power to do what their job's supposed to be. They've got to have all these other considerations except find the criminal and catch him, jail him, and send him to court, and then jail after that. So I don't know. I'm sort of going off line there, but
no. That kind of makes sense, and I'm seeing a consistent argument through there, and it actually gives us a good framework to discuss things on. So my opinion on the Vlad laws when they were first introduced was that it was like, and well, actually, before I say what this is, I've got to say it isn't. Like, I've had, I dealt with, the outlaw motorcycle, the small group, because of course, not every motorcycling enthusiast is.
absolutely.
That's where I'm going with this. Okay, like I want to make a clarification. Just because you ride a bike and you're in some sort of organization, like it doesn't mean that you're a criminal. So but like, so for the outlaw motorcycle gangs, I did have a bit of dealings with them, especially, both as a uniform officer, first responder, and when I did some investigating, and yes, like they are a serious threat because almost all of the drugs that are bought and sold in places like Cairns, it's through the bikies. And if you tried to like, if you tried to move in, well, you're probably going to end up in some cane field somewhere deep.
Oh, you mean they don't have our best interests at
Yeah,
heart?
I know.
Oh, okay. Now we know where we're going from.
Yeah, and yes, they are motorcycling enthusiasts, but there's a little bit more than motorcycling enthusiasm for motorcycles involved in being in some of these organisations. So yeah, I mean, I got that, but like, and I thought, yeah, we got to smack these guys. But as someone who's more conservatively inclined, I was really concerned about those laws because I thought, well, what'll happen is the conservatives will introduce these things kind of like thinking, we're going to deal with this problem. It's going to specifically just be in this area. We're going to be able to silo it. There won't be any mission creep, Well, so you think of what's assumed behind that. It's like, oh, well, we're going to be in power forever. The right people with the right intentions are going to be
100%. Yeah, Campbell Newman stuff that. Yeah, that's right.
And so my concern was this, that, when they lost power, it's like, okay, so we've got these kind of like the terrorist, kind of basically what's happened with the terrorism laws, especially in the States. It's like, okay, so it's terrorist organizations. Are you pro-terror? It's like, no. Okay, well, these are criminal organizations. Are you pro-crime? It's like, no.
You hit it right in the head. Mission creep, mate. That's what it's become.
And that's what I was scared of. I thought, well, hang on. Maybe, some of the views that I hold and some of the world views that, I mean, being a deplorable, does that make you a criminal? So not being an anti-racist, whatever that means, does that mean you're a criminal? Silence is violence. My real concern with those laws was that, like, okay, and we did smack, I got to be honest, mate, they smacked the bikies so hard with that. Back then, we smacked the bikies so hard with that. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Like watching these guys like jumping on planes, flying off to Bali. Like
it stopped. It actually stopped them in their tracks. It was fantastic.
It smashed them. But I thought, nah, this as good as it was, I thought it was bad legislation because I thought that it's going to end up with the mission creep. And I was actually happy. Here's the thing, Alan. I was genuinely happy when Palaszczuk withdrew those laws rather than keeping them and rubbing her hands together and going, oh, Matt and Ellen.
You're next.
Yeah. By the way, you're a thought criminal, so you're in the Catholic Church. Oh, well, we don't like them because, they oppose abortion and that makes you a bad person. And hey, I'm sorry, we're going to have to. So I was really,
point taken.
Yeah, I was really, really happy with that. And with the wokeification thing too, I mean, I got to be really careful here because this is actually government policy. I understand where you're coming from. I suppose this is something that I can say, but like, and putting aside what I feel about that personally, whether or not I think it's good policy, the idea that you can't expect the commissioner and the rank and file to stand up too much and especially be outspoken and say, hey, we think this is good or bad, or we think this is whatever it is, because that really is the deep state stuff that we talk about. And what I mean by that is if you have unelected and fundamentally unaccountable bureaucrats, especially law enforcement officers who really are a kind of like have that extra weight behind their office because they're related to the courts and all that kind of stuff, to ask them to stand up against elected representatives, that's deep state stuff, Al. Look,
that's revolution in that instance you're talking there. But surely the people in charge in the police department, when these DEI instructions started creeping into the service, wouldn't you think? Well, just to give you an example, Matt, do you think it's a good idea that, if it even happens, to have two women out on patrol? Do you think that would be a good idea? Because we all want to be equal and diverse and all equitable.
It was a real problem. Like when I was a shift supervisor, because like I'd be putting
you
it together.
Like,
okay, you work with you, you work with who, and you know, when it kind of like when we started getting a lot of women in the service, the
which
thing
isn't
that
a
made
bad
it,
thing.
great thing. The thing that made it difficult was because like you get some girls and mate, the way I'd look at it is like, you know, when you first start, you're really thinking hard about who works with who. But after a while, you get to know your team and you know they all
Yeah.
work pretty well together. It kind of really doesn't, you know, you've got the basic of just say, okay, Smith, you're working with Jones, Blogs, you're with, you know, such and such. You know, every now and then though, you get the girls like there were a couple of girls in one of the teams I worked with that would come sliding up and go, "Oh, Matt, you've worked me with such and such, and I don't want to, and I don't work with another girl because, and it's not that I don't like women, it's just that like if it goes bad,
You need
I want,
backup.
but see, that wasn't everybody all of the time. Like that was
No.
that was a couple of individuals, and by the same token, in the same team, like if like you know, I had one lady come up to me, very competent, very capable police officer. She goes, "Oh, Matt, you know, I noticed you never worked me with other women." And like I'd only been putting teams together for a couple of weeks, and it was kind of like not long after I had that chat, and I was like, "Yeah, because such and such said that." She goes, "Well, that rule doesn't apply to me. Mix it up."
Yeah.
And she was a pretty handy. I got to be honest. Like, I mean, yes, a female and everything like that, but like, and yes, it doesn't matter how fit you are as a female. Like, if you're a man of equal standard, you're just going to be 30% stronger and faster. Yeah, I get all that.
Yeah.
But like, she was a fit, strong, you know, trained policewoman, and so like
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard. I suppose the point, you know, by answering by by answering with an observation, what I'm trying to say, it's difficult, and you can't actually you know, give a hard and fast rule. And the other thing is like with the recognition, because now we're just talking about physicality, which is something where you know men are better at. But like, and I know this is a big broad stroke, but it's also true. Generally speaking, women are more empathetic than men, which means, generally speaking, and there's a lot of qualifications to this, in some circumstances, they're going to be better communicators. They're simply going to be better communicators.
But is that really, depending on the situation, of course, Matt, is that really going to help a volatile situation that needs
Yes,
action like now?
100%. Like, because like, I mean, if something goes to hell, no. But see, you know, what you want to do is prevent things from going to hell. Now, of course, you know, something that used to annoy me when I was in the police, the kind of like media, and even to a certain degree, with some qualifications, I wouldn't say all of the courts all the time, or even all of the lawyers all the time. They kind of treated stuff like it's like, okay, well, if this got bad, if this went violent and it got bad, it was probably your fault because you weren't communicating properly. But sometimes that would be true. But yes, true. So I mean, you get some cop that's had a bad day, and mate, look, you know, I mean, there have been more than one or two jobs that I've walked out and gone, oh man, you know, why did you say that? Like, you know, I've done those things. So what I'm going with this, and I'll quickly wrap it up because I know you will talk. Is that like, as much as that annoyed me because it wasn't fair, because some people have just made a decision they're going to fight you. That's about out of the 5% of people who are serious criminals who you deal with, there's about 5% of them. So 5% of the 5% will fight you. Okay. There's nothing you can do. But that's still a lot of play. So if you've got someone who can communicate and better communicator there, it validates the truth of like, hey, if it's gone bad, maybe you could have communicated a bit better. Does that make sense?
But having said that, Matt, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why do you think that Queensland is absolutely struggling to get police officers?
Oh, look, I really want to answer that question, but I would be.
I might know where you come from.
I can't criticize government policy. And recruiting policy is direct government policy. I just can't comment on that.
Well, it's not. But put it this way, Matt, it isn't going to have a quick upswing in the next 6 months. Put it that way.
No, and
radical changes.
Yeah, and the other thing is, look, I mean, but again, I kind of like. Let me choose my words carefully here. Okay. So John Kennedy's brother, Bobby Kennedy, he was like their version of the federal attorney general. You know, just before he just before he kind of went for president and during the Kennedy administration. And he's famous and remembering, so this is the Kennedy administration. So it's kind of left wing. This is the administration where civil libertarian stuff was put forward. It was a big thing where they kind of like, they didn't defund, but they were really changing the way policing was happening and everything. And he said, you get the police service you want. And sorry, you get, because it's elected over there too, but it's also, it didn't mean direct elections. He meant like through government policy. And he said, you get the police, you get the police service you want, and you get the amount of crime you deserve. So that, again, it comes back to this idea as like, okay, could or should the police as an organization be saying, hey, this is what you got to do? Like, no. I mean, that's what the police union is for. The police union can, to a certain extent, in so much as they are representative of the police, and that's another discussion in and of itself. Although the Queensland Police is highly unionised. So it could kind of like, unlike other organisations, because, we are now an incredibly de-unionised society for Australia. The exceptions being the police, the nurses, ambulance, and teachers. But even the teachers thing is changing because like red unions.
The nurses have got their the red union's got a nurses union too. The red union, that's very that's on the move as opposed to normal, let's say traditional union membership. I think that commercialisation or as a privatisation of the unions these days, I think it's reaping some good.
Absolutely.
Good policy changes. And getting back to the police don't make the laws. The judges don't make the laws. There's only one type of person that makes the laws, and that's the politicians. And if they're too gutless to change the laws to meet the community's expectations, piss them off. Get rid of them. Because the judges, at the moment, we see the judges, in my view, totally left-leaning, take any option but the direct, proper course of recidivist offenders. Well, there's no, and the public knows it, there's no penalty, there's no, what would you say? Penalty for what they do. No consequence. So change the laws, but politicians are too gutless to do it. And I'm not saying Liberals, well, you don't know about the LNP because they don't have policies. They have all these mission statements and motherhood statements. We know the Labor ones. Everyone knows the Labor policies because they've been in government. But the new kid on the block, old Mr. Crickets, he talks the talk, but we're yet to see any in writing policies on what they're going to do.
I kind of like, and again, like, the other issue with the judiciary is you actually do need, again, like you always end up with this, swings and roundabouts. Like you really do want an impartial judiciary. And yes, there is a certain culture held by the vast majority of judicial officers. They've been selected by a certain party. They're enforcing certain laws. And they are actually given guidelines too, like as to how to interpret things. Like the Acts Interpretation Act tells people, like, and it's law saying, hey, this is how you got to interpret things. All right.
And that's where the politicians should come into it, Matt, because I don't think the judiciary is meeting the community's expectations of good law.
But I mean, how do you hold them accountable? Because they're unelected and like you can't sack them.
No, of course you can't. But there's always, this is which is what sort of drove me to stand for council.
Yes, incidentally. I do want to talk about that.
No, that's fine. But what I think is people in positions of influence don't think outside the square. And if the judiciary isn't meeting the community's expectation, and as you said, they've got some guidelines to stick to, which is fine, well, you change it. And then one of the easiest ways to do is to increase the penalty. So bring in minimum sentencing, not this crap that Palaszczuk and that have brought in. Oh, no, we've increased the maximum penalty. They don't get the maximum penalty now. So doubling the maximum penalty won't make any difference at all. So what we got to do is, okay, right, we'll bring in some minimum sentencing. So that takes that option out of the hands of the judiciary and say, this is the law and that's the penalty. It's end of story. See you later. Next customer. Thank you.
Yeah, and look, that's true, and I actually can discuss this, especially if we take it out of the state situation and put it in a federal thing. Like how the law is interpreted, you're quite right, is spot on. And actually, if I can pump one of my other great interviews, I spoke to Professor James Allen, who's one of
How good is he?
Mate, legend.
I forgot to mention him. He's another one of my victims. He is a great speaker.
Oh yeah, mate. And look, we discussed that. We discussed specifically around this. So, what's legitimate, what's not, how do you hold people accountable? But the Love case, oh my God, like that was just pure judicial activism. Yes. Absolute, complete. We don't care what the parliament says.
That one up.
We don't care what the law says. We're transcendent thinkers. We know more than you plebs. Our moral antennae vibrate at a higher level. I've actually read it. I've actually read the Love case. And if you
constitutional, I just can't believe it.
But the other thing is like you got to read Justice Spiegelman's comments on this. It's like all of a sudden, I mean, he goes way beyond interpreting the law and starts talking about like all this, his knowledge of Indigenous issues, which is just like a joke, and starts talking about this stuff like well, it's true, we know, like you're making all these assertions. Like we know there is
a appointment.
Oh my God. Like, and yeah, he was a Tory appointment. Totally. Totally.
Not meeting community expectations.
So, I mean, so yes, I kind of get where you're coming from, but like, we got to be really, if I can use the word we, and I mean, we as a community too. I don't just mean conservatively inclined people. I know this means the sane left. I know this means, the kind of like, moderate Labor Party and all this kind of stuff. We have to be really careful about empowering unelected, unaccountable people too much, but also expecting too much of them. Like I would never, would never presume to read Justice Spiegelman's mind, although he presumes to read the mind of the minds of all Australians, but like, or at least all the moral ones as he sees them. But like, I'm sure that considering the intellectual ecosystem that he's part of, that all of that made perfect sense. You know what I mean? He didn't see himself as sprouting complete crap. Like, you write that down going, he would have written that and read it and reread and gone, yeah, man.
But what silo was he coming from?
Sorry?
What silo does he spend his time in? Because it's not the general community that reflects those views. It might be that tiny little silo of the High Court of Australia in Canberra, in the suburb of Deakin or whatever it is. Because I'm sure these people aren't walking the streets of downtown Cairns and seeing the disgrace of what happens on a day-to-day basis. I know he's a High Court judge and not down their level. But this is even the magistrates. What silos are they engaging in around the place?
Well, I mean, we're going to be really careful here because
I know.
Well, the other thing is, mate, I've interviewed a former magistrate like Mr. Black, who is
Trevor Black.
Trevor Black, legend. Yeah. He warned me for contempt twice. He was this close to. I can tell the story because I'm out of the police, right? So I was relieving prosecuting because a guy in a stolen car ran into me. So I was like, I was on light duties and I was prosecuting. But I didn't do the prosecuting course, which meant that the only contested matters, and prosecuting is actually pretty easy, right? Like generally speaking, you're reading out court briefs that another copper has read. The only contested matters that you can do, so that is to say the only case law you've got to know inside and out, is actually around bail. So we had this bail. The drug squad came and see me, and they'd locked up this guy. He was he'd been initially charged with trafficking and all this other stuff. He got out on bail, and they re-raided his house, and they found like just minor stuff, like bag and bond kind of stuff at his house, like not much, and it was in a communal area. So the drug squad came and saw me and said, Maloney, look, we've just pinched this guy. He's a serious crook, mate. We really need this guy kept in the bin. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, of course, not being trained, that meant that I spent, no kidding, Alan, like, I mean this, I spent, so I knocked off at 4 and I was at the station until 11 o'clock that night researching case law, and I'm doing up the notes, man. And I got the, if they say this, so I had all the little, like, boom, and I'm like, and I'm walking in, I'm strutting into court the next day, man.
I got this.
I got this, right?
Yeah.
But it was actually going to be heard on the second floor. So I get in the elevator, and the solicitor, who was representing this guy, who was a very high flying, very well known, very competent, very capable solicitor, gets in the elevator with me. He looks at me and goes, "Oh, Maloney, you doing the such and such case?" And I went, "Yep." And he goes, "You got nothing. He's going to be out within 2 minutes." And mate, it boiled my piss because like I didn't like this guy and he didn't like me and he didn't like the police, and it's kind of like it's one of those things. And I was like, "Yeah, well, we'll see, sir." And anyway, so we get up there, and it was actually Mr. Black. So we front Mr. Black. This solicitor gets up and goes, "Your Honor, blah 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 blah." He outlines his thing. Found in a communal area, bag and bong stuff. This is rubbish. The police are harassing my client. Let him out straight away. Like, don't even, you don't even need to listen to this guy. Just ask, and we'll concede to conditions, and pretty hard ones. Like, if he's got to come in 3 days a week, whatever it is. Mr. Black turns around to me and goes, "Yes, I agree." Sorry, he goes to the solicitor who was involved. He goes, "Yes, I agree." Hey?
Pete Malik?
No, it wasn't. Don't. So he goes, "No, Beeb's really good too. Oh my God, there's a razor sharp legal mind behind there." Anyway, no, this chap was in that level, really good. And he goes, "Yes, I agree with you completely." And he turns around to me and he goes, "What conditions do you want?" And I was like, and the solicitor said, "I'm not making this up, hey. Like, this is the way it rolled, bro." So the solicitor sits down, he's got this shit-eating grin on his face, and he's looking at me like, "This, oh, my blood is boiling, bro." Because I've been like, I spent like, and because I didn't get overtime, like you don't get overtime for doing that, man. So I was like there till 11 o'clock at night, and I've jumped up and gone, "You haven't even heard me. You simply can't do this. You're in serious breach of the way court does." And I'm passionate like this because my eyes are open. And he goes, "I have asked you to give me conditions. That's all I want from you." And I went, "Sir, you're in breach of the thing." The other solicitor jumps up and goes, "That's contempt of court twice now. Jail him." Sits down. And because like all the watch house coppers, they're sitting there and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like,
"Jeez."
And I said, "Well, will it even make any point?" Like, and he goes, "I mean it. You listen to me very carefully. One more word, anything other than the conditions you want, and you're going to jail."
Man.
But mate, he is a really good, like, and because I can tell that now because he's retired. Not only is he an excellent, okay, he erred at that condition. He erred. He got that wrong. But he is an excellent magistrate, and we're actually friends. Like every now and then.
I touch football with Blackie.
You would not find a better man. He's got character. He's kind of, look, I'll even go further. You're talking about the kind of people that go in. He's one of us.
Yeah, that's right. I'll put him down because I know I can have a beer with him. Yeah, exactly.
He's one of us. Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't sit, from my point of view, he's the sort of person that would never sit in a silo of just other lawyers and prosecutors, that circle. He's got wider life experience than some of the people I see getting around these days.
Yeah, I mean, smart, decent, he's got it all. And you know what? He was totally right. I mean, it was one of those things where he should have listened to me. And like, we did talk about it later. He goes, "Yeah, I accept that." And he goes, "But mate, you were way out of line. Like, you cannot do that in court. That was contempt." He goes, "Mate, you're lucky I didn't jail you the second time." And you know what? Yes, correct. Yeah. He goes, the only reason I didn't jail you is because like I kind of got a bit of respect for you, and like I know you're passionate and I know you care. He goes, "But mate, listen to me loud and clear. You cannot talk to a magistrate in open court like that. You can't do it. The end. No ifs, no buts, no maybes." And I'm like, head down. I'm like, "Yes, sir."
Yep.
Like,
You have to have a drink with me one day and explain that whole thing.
but see, I mean, but see, that's the thing. That comes back to hierarchy. It's like, as passionate as we get, like there is a system, you know what I mean? And as you know, as much as we're sure, and you get the wrongs, you know, no system is going to be perfect. Like we want to be careful about, you know, undermining the principles of impartiality. We want to be careful about like, oh, you know, we should be able to kick him out. Well, you know, you actually need the judiciary to be able to kind of like say, well, we don't know about this sometimes. Okay, you know, can we both agree that the Love case was like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me? But you also need the case where, like, I mean, you know, if God forbid some ridiculous law, like, oh, you have to start rounding up yeah, whatever. I mean, you know, pick it up and like really considering like this is not like 10 years ago, you'd have sniggered at this conversation, but now it's like it's, you know, when silence is violence and, you know, and all white privilege and yada, yada, yada. It's actually, I mean, it's not unforeseeable that we could actually get some of these laws. And especially when you mix it with hate speech laws, which now, thank God, are not being done by the police. They're being done by other organizations.
Yeah.
But it would literally take, literally take the flick of a legislatory pen to go, the cops are doing this now. And all of a sudden, it's no longer being done by tribunals and stuff like that. It's criminal. And like you're going to jail.
Yeah, we don't want that. Yeah.
You know,
no one would agree to that.
Yeah. So then you're going to need magistrates and judges to be able to stand up and go, well, I don't know how I kind of feel about this. You know what I mean? Hopefully they would. I mean, I don't know. You can only hope.
If you go by the level of law, well, how'd that Love case get through?
Oh, yeah, that was just that shouldn't have even been entertained.
It's the
you know, I've spoken. Admittedly, I'm going not just with Jim because I spoke to David Flint, who's another Australian. You know, he's a legend. Mate, I spoke to him on the phone about this not long after it happened. And,
he's a constitutional lawyer, isn't he, David Flint?
Yeah. So this is his area of expertise.
Yeah.
Look, this is his thing because it was a constitutional case. Yeah. And David, as you know, has very well-rounded vowels, like his old ABC.
Well, he's a 1950s ABC presenter.
Oh, man, I love him, man. He is so cool. And, like, I'm kind of paraphrasing. It's like, oh, Matthew, I don't want to speak too ill of the people in the courts, but I was rather surprised that they even entertained it, Matthew. I don't even think they should have entertained that case. It shouldn't have even made it. I love him, mate. He's so
he's a beauty, mate.
So you know, the point being, you know, where we're going with that, besides just like, you know, having a rambunctious conversation that we're both immensely, is that, you know, we have to be, and I don't mean everyone I don't just mean conservatives. I mean anyone who has a basic respect for democracy, a basic respect for the institutions that we have. We want to be very careful about what we ask for. Because the more undermining of that thing that we get, the more the institutions and the principle, you know, the more cynical people get about the principles behind the institutions and the institutions themselves.
Yeah, I think, Matt, what the problem that I see it is the because I would consider myself a mildly libertarian outlook on life there, and any fractions is always blamed on the right for questioning, let's say, the judiciary, right? But it seems to me that the left, what would you say,
they weren't doing it under justice.
The elitists are changing the social structure of the court system, implementing, I don't know, through the, don't know how they're doing it, but it's coming out in the court process, and the normal blokes in the street saying, what the fuck? How can this happen? Yeah. And especially that Love case. What connection to Aboriginality are these two bloody drongos doing? Like, it's so out of
kilter.
Yeah.
I can actually look. I can answer that question, and this is something I've thought about a lot. There are many things. So I'm going to clarify what I'm going to preface what I say before that. But the thin edge of the wedge was what we call human rights. Now, because like, again, who can disagree with human rights? Like all these things were written in the UN. You had conservatives like Churchill behind this. You had like, so there was a consensus around there that these principles were good things. Now, the way it's been interpreted though and applied is very, very different, because you have two basic, like with human rights, you have a right to be free from something. So, that's one part of human rights. So freedom from hunger, that's one thing. People should have a right to be free from hunger. Yes. Oh, they should be, free from homelessness. They should be free from this kind of stuff. And everyone nods along.
Yeah.
What the vast majority of people don't understand is that actually puts an obligation on other people, so taxpayers and the government. Because like if a person who doesn't have the capacity, willingness, or whatever it is to build themselves a shelter, they need to be free from shelter. Well, someone's got to supply that. Now that was it's kind of different from the way it was sold view of rights. So the government can't do stuff to you unless. So you'd be free from arbitrary arrest, free from, and you had a right to due process. You had a right to all these other things. So there's been this real muddying of the waters. And then when you throw in these other like really kind of like obtuse stuff, and more importantly, because when those rights were first conceptualized, they're conceptualized as individual, you start talking about collective rights. That's the thing, Alan. So rather than an individual has a right to a house, which kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, we're wealthy enough to afford that. All right, and free from arbitrary arrest, like 100%, yes. Even as you and I are both strong and big on law enforcement. But then when it's collective rights, so it's like, oh well, Indigenous people have a special connection with the land, and that's fundamentally what Spiegelman was talking about.
Who's pushing that barrier?
But again, so they have a right to this. So it's all this, what human rights, the way they're being applied and interpreted now, are actually being used to undermine the age-old principles that we had in British law. And they specifically articulate that. Like that's what they mean. When I say they, I mean, obviously, the establishment, the universities and stuff like that. That's what they mean when they say decolonize. They say, these old principles that were brought to Australia, and they were. Like again, they got a point. What these age-old British Westminster principles, the idea that people should be treated as individuals rather than a collective, that's kind of like, that's a Western idea. The idea that everybody deserves due process, the miracle upon miracle that people deserve the presumption of innocence. Like that doesn't even really exist, arguably, in some places in Western Europe.
No.
Like arguably. Like that's an Anglosphere thing, really. So when they're talking about decolonization and you link it with this concept of like collective rights, what we understand as law and order now is being turned on its head. And you can see it. Like that's why we're all angry, because you can see it. Like it's being turned on its head. And it's being turned on its head pretty quickly. I can't see it stopping, Alan, to be honest.
Oh, well, I hope it does, because I thought we were going okay. And I know people don't like change, but when it's changed for the worse, well, then you got to start saying, no, that's wrong. That's right. And like I keep saying, politicians they've got to wear this on their shoulders, because they're the ones that make the laws.
Yeah.
You can blame everyone else, but they're the ones that make the laws.
And it comes down to progress. I mean, you've hit on something very interesting there. It's like, I mean, do we all agree on progress? Yes. Do we want to move forward? Yes. Well, moving forward looks like this. Oh, wait a minute. That sounds like a giant leap backwards. I don't see that as progressive like me personally. So again, it's really strange with speaking with these elitists, as you said, and they're kind of like, the woke left. We use the same words, Alan, but we are speaking completely different languages. Like when I say rights, like you and I have a certain conceptualization in our head and what it means and what it looks like. But I can tell you, because like I actually know people in the Human Rights Commission here. I know people that like have, in Canberra working on this. They have a completely different idea in their heads when we use these same words. like completely different. There's not even, again, we are
Yeah.
actually speaking
Yeah.
different languages. And I don't mean that ironically.
Yeah. Did you mention the Human Rights Commission, Matt?
Yeah.
Didn't they? I thought they got disbanded about 5 years ago because I
Federal.
haven't heard from the mongrels for 5 years when my human rights were being bastardised through the COVID.
Yeah.
Did not hear a peep out of those mongrels.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, they're not my favourite team. They're definitely.
Yeah, and again, considering that they're both state and federal, so obviously I can't talk about I can't knock any state policy, but federally speaking, it's amazing that these federal human rights commissions that are supposed to be overlooking the evil redneck states who may jump out of line. Like again, if you say something wrong on Twitter, if you question some sort of narrative or you say, gee,
it's just a joke.
It's so hypocritical. It's like, gee, I really don't know if setting up a separate organizer, setting up a separate wing of parliament for Indigenous people based along race. I really don't know if that's going to be a good idea. They're happy to jump all over you for that, but it's like, you can't participate in society if you don't go and get this forced medical treatment.
Yeah, that's right. That is 100%.
Nothing.
Two rules.
And what's the actual biggest thing? What is the biggest inroads on actual rights? Like really, like, so they're kind of like saying, well, you can't talk about these things.
No,
hang on, aren't you the Human Rights Commission? Aren't you the guy supposed to be facilitating conversation? And secondly, you can't participate in society if you don't go and get this medical treatment. Yeah.
I know this will surprise you, but they've denied twice now my overtures to come on the show. So I don't know why they've.
Well, it's really funny because, like, as I said to an acquaintance, I wouldn't say friend because it's like the person hardly ever speaks to me, but an acquaintance that works for the Federal Human Rights Commission. I said, 1984 wasn't supposed to be a roadmap. That wasn't a blueprint. You guys weren't supposed to read that and go, oh, that's the way we do it. So we changed the meanings of words. Okay. And we go, oh, right. And so a Human Rights Commission actually ends up being an oppressive tool, tool of oppression. I said, that was supposed to be a warning. It was a warning.
The Department of Truth.
Yeah, not a roadmap, guys. Like,
no, 100%.
Okay. Oh, look, we're enjoying this too much. Okay, so you've got your Vote One Alan Benn shirt. Show us that. Like,
Mate, look at that. What a great model.
So you're standing for council. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Matt, I've decided to throw my hat in the ring there. I've been campaigning for about 4 weeks now. As we know, in a couple of weeks' time, 14 days, it'll be all over, and we'll see what happens there. But I kept getting triggered by, from my point of view, Matt, the overbearing power of faceless, unelected bureaucrats that don't have the interests of the residents of Cairns at heart. They've got their interests at heart. And I thought, no, bugger this. It's gone on too long. We need someone there that's going to stick it back to them, because I think it's just crazy what we're doing. And the last, when I say that, the last thing that triggered it was that where the CEO just arbitrarily said, no, we're not going to have cash used at the dumps or whatever. They go, hang on, that's still legal tender as far as I'm concerned. She can't have the right to tell me that I can't use cash. And before it was the fishing and this sort of, I think, no, these people need some straightening out, and that's what I'm going to try and do if I'm elected, mate. So
yeah, and mate, and good on you for that. And now, as the kind of like leading up towards the end, plug the show, mate, because I love Cairns Conversations, and I'm serious about that. I really do enjoy your show. So when's it on, and all that?
Yeah, no, we every Saturday after the 9 o'clock news, Matt, on 89.1. There you go. What a great. You've done that well, Matt. Like I say, when I finish off every program there, Matt, always question authority. You've got to. You cannot trust authority anymore. They've blown it too many times.